When Jada and Janelle walked into Rosewood Hills Academy, everyone saw two quiet black girls, but no one saw what they were truly capable of. The stares, the whispers, the cruel jokes. They took it all in silence. But deep inside, something powerful was waiting. Trained, focused, unshakable. The students thought they were picking on victims. What they really did was wake a storm. If you feel drawn in, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we have a story that will leave you speechless. The morning sun lit up Rosewood Hills Academy like something out of a movie. The buildings were tall and proud, with red brick walls and wide windows. Perfect hedges lined the sidewalks. Everything was neat, clean, and expensive looking. Jada and Janelle Rivers stood at the front gates side by side. Their uniforms were crisp, ties straight, shoes polished. Their father had made sure they were ready for this day. But even with their perfect appearance, they could feel the weight of the place pressing in on them. From the moment they stepped through the gate, they felt the stares. Not friendly ones, not even curious ones. These looks were quiet, sharp, and cold. They didn't need to hear the whispers to know what people were thinking. They were black. They were new. And in a school full of white students from wealthy families, that made them different. Too different. Jada glanced at her sister. Janelle didn't look back, but her grip on her backpack tightened. They both felt the same thing. That sense of being watched like they didn't belong. But they didn't say a word. Their father had taught them to stay calm, to carry themselves with pride no matter what. Control is power, he always said. They want a reaction. Don't give it to them. So they kept walking. Their steps were slow, even, and strong. They didn't flinch when a group of boys near the lockers laughed too loudly. They didn't stop when they heard a girl whisper something and giggle. They kept their heads up and their faces calm. In the courtyard, the trees bloomed with pink flowers. The grass stayed trimmed and green. From the outside, everything looked peaceful. But for Jada and Janelle, every step felt like a test. Every smile was fake. Every laugh too loud. They had each other, always. But even warriors need rest. And there was no peace here. Still, they moved through it like ghosts in armor, seen but never touched, walking through a world that didn't want to claim them, but couldn't look away. They weren't just waiting for the storm. They were becoming the calm before it. It started with red paint. Thick, dripping streaks of it sprayed across Jada and Janelle's lockers like blood on a wall. Slurs scrawled in bold letters. Crude drawings scratched across the metal. Stuffed through the vents were crumpled pieces of paper, each more disgusting than the last. Messages meant to dehumanize, to strip them of their dignity in front of everyone. The hallway buzzed with laughter. Phones came out, cameras clicking, screens lighting up. Some students pointed. Others whispered behind cupped hands, but no one stopped it. No one said a word. Jada's jaw tightened. Janelle stood frozen beside her, her hands curled into fists so tight her knuckles turned white. Ryan Mallory leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smiling like he just won something. "Just a little welcome gift," he called out, loud enough for the crowd. "Figured you two needed some color in your life." The laughter rose again, louder this time, meaner, but the twins said nothing. They didn't shout. They didn't cry. They didn't flinch. They just cleaned it up. With paper towels handed to them by a janitor who wouldn't meet their eyes, they wiped down the paint in silence. Their movements slow, steady, deliberate. Not because they weren't angry, but because they were. And control was the only thing they had left. Until later that day. The courtyard was unusually full. The air buzzed with something electric. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Students gathered in small clusters, watching, waiting. Even the teachers seemed absent, distracted. Ryan was already there, flanked by Zach and Brent. Their laughter rang out across the space as Jada and Janelle approached, side by side as always. "There they are," Ryan said, stepping into their path. "Didn't think you'd show your faces after this morning." Jada didn't stop walking. "Move." "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll call Daddy?" Brent snorted. "Maybe they'll cry again. Seemed like they were about to earlier." Zach added, "Maybe we didn't go far enough." Janelle's voice came low and steady. "You already did." Ryan took a step closer. "You really think you belong here?" he spat. You think you're going to scare us into silence? No, Jada said, but we're done being silent. Then Ryan shoved her, hard. Her feet slid back, just a step. But she caught herself with perfect balance, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Everything stopped. The laughter died. The courtyard went still. Brent reached forward and knocked Janelle's books from her arms. Pages scattered across the concrete. Zach stepped in and shoved her shoulder with a mocking grin. What now? And that was the moment. The exact second when the line was crossed, clear and sharp. Jada's breath steadied. Janelle's stance shifted. The switch had been flipped. Not out of rage, but out of resolve. Jada moved first, fast, but not frantic. Her palm shot forward and hit Ryan's chest with a practiced, controlled force. He staggered back. Breath knocked from his lungs. Before he could catch himself, she stepped to the side, eyes locked, feet grounded, balance perfect. Brent lunged at Janelle, but she dropped low, sweeping his legs with precision. He hit the ground with a thud that stole the air from his chest. Zach rushed in with a wild swing. No form, no control. But Janelle turned, caught his wrist midair, twisted, and flipped him onto his back. His head hit the ground with a sharp crack of breath. The courtyard exploded. Students backed away in a wide circle. No one stepped in. No one cheered. They just watched, frozen, wide-eyed, as everything they thought they knew unraveled in front of them. These weren't just two quiet girls from the wrong zip code. They were trained. They were ready. They were not afraid. Ryan, red-faced and furious, charged again. Jada ducked low, turned his momentum against him, and drove a clean elbow into his ribs. He dropped, gasping, clutching his side. Brent stumbled up, fists swinging wildly. But Janelle was already in motion, sidestepping, locking his arms, bringing him down hard. Zach, slower now, tried to back away. But Janelle stepped into his path, eyes steady. He raised his hands in surrender before she even touched him. It wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. Delivered without hate, without chaos, only discipline. When it was over, the three boys lay sprawled on the ground, groaning, humiliated. Jada and Janelle stood over them, breathing hard but steady, their eyes still sharp and focused. "You thought quiet meant weak," Jada said, her voice clear and calm. "You thought you could break us." Janelle added, "You never realized we were trained not to fight, but to end fights." From the edge of the crowd, someone whispered, "Whoa." Another student said, "Did you see that?" They didn't even flinch. Phones were still recording. Screens captured every move. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth had already arrived. The truth didn't need editing. It needed no explanation. The truth was two black girls, disciplined, powerful, unbroken, standing tall where others had tried to drag them low. A whistle blew in the distance. A staff member finally appeared. "What's going on here?" someone shouted. "Self-defense." "It's all on video." But by the time adults rushed in, the moment had already passed. The damage was done, not to the twins, but to the lie that they were fragile, the lie that they didn't belong, the lie that they were the problem. Jada and Janelle turned without a word, their backs straight, their path clear. They didn't need to stay and explain. They had nothing to prove, because everyone finally saw what was always there. They weren't here to fight. They were here to stand. And when pushed past the line, they didn't fall. They rose. The silence after the fight was louder than the chaos that came before it. Within hours, the video was everywhere, shared across student group chats, posted anonymously on social media, and replayed by parents who never imagined their school could become the center of a storm. The footage was clear. Jada and Janelle, precise and composed, defending themselves against boys twice their size. There were no wild punches, no screaming, no chaos. Only discipline, only control. But even with the truth caught on camera, the school hesitated. Jada and Janelle were called into the office the next morning, not to be congratulated, not to be heard, but to be questioned. "We've received concerning reports," the assistant principal said, eyes fixed on her clipboard instead of their faces. "There are rumors, videos, Parents are upset. Which parents? Janelle asked quietly. We can't say, the principal replied. It didn't matter. The Rivers family knew. Ryan Mallory's parents were already spinning their version of the story, one where their son was a victim, where the girls had snapped, and where nothing leading up to the attack mattered. But this time the Rivers weren't alone. The neighbors came first. One by one, parents who had seen the fight, or the lead up to it, began calling the school. A few even sent copies of the footage to the district. Then came the students, some brave enough to step forward to say what they'd seen, the pranks, the slurs, the isolation. Even a teacher, Miss Tran, quietly submitted a report of her own. She had seen the warning signs. She had said nothing, but now she couldn't stay silent. At home, Derek Rivers was quiet as always, but he didn't shrink. He sat in meetings, calm and clear. He answered questions with patience, never with anger. When reporters asked for interviews, he declined them all. His focus was on his daughters, not the headlines. They'll try to rewrite the story, as he told them. That's what systems like this do. But truth doesn't panic. It waits. And when it stands up, people see what they've been pretending not to. When the school tried to offer a compromise, a brief suspension for all students involved, they said. Derek shook his head. My daughters won't be punished for defending themselves. Not now, not ever. The district wavered, but public pressure grew. And pressure, when loud enough, shifts even the most stubborn institutions. Parents began speaking up in school board meetings. They were attacked. They warned you. This is bigger than a fight. Soon it wasn't just about Jada and Janelle. Other students came forward, kids who had suffered in silence. A Korean-American girl who had been mocked for her accent, a Muslim boy who'd found slurs scratched into his desk, a black freshman who had switched schools last year and never said why, until now. One by one, the stories stacked up, too many to ignore. Eventually, the school relented. Jada and Janelle's records were cleared. Ryan and his friends were suspended and placed under investigation. A formal inquiry into racial climate at Rosewood Hills was launched. Training sessions were scheduled. New policies written, but none of that happened overnight, and none of it came without cost. There were whispers, side eyes in the halls, the feeling of being watched, not with hate this time, but with curiosity, discomfort. Like people didn't know whether to apologize or pretend nothing had ever happened. The girls kept walking, just like always, but this time heads nodded when they passed. And for the first time when they sat in the courtyard, they weren't alone. A classmate sat beside them, then another. Not everyone, but enough to feel the difference. Change, Derek told them, never arrives in a flash. It comes like the tide, he said one night on the porch. Slow, inevitable. You don't see it until the shore looks different than it did before. Jada leaned her head on his shoulder. Janelle closed her eyes and listened to the quiet. They hadn't won everything, but they had started something, and that was enough to carry forward. The air at Rosewood Hills Academy felt different now. It wasn't louder. It wasn't more welcoming in any obvious way. But something had shifted. Something you could feel more than see. A kind of gravity had settled over the halls. Not heavy, but steady, like the walls themselves now remembered. Jada and Janelle walked those halls the same way they always had. Shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward, back straight. But this time people moved for them. Not out of fear, not anymore. Out of respect. The boys who'd mocked them? Gone. Expelled. The school board's statement had been brief but decisive. Zero tolerance for racial harassment and targeted violence. Ryan's name, once whispered with power, had become a cautionary tale. Not just of cruelty, but of getting caught believing no one would ever fight back. And the twins? They didn't speak much about the fight. They didn't have to. Their legacy wasn't the punches. It was the silence they endured, the grace they held, the power they claimed only when pushed too far, and even then, with precision. New policies were put in place. Bias training for staff, a student equity council, anonymous reporting systems. For the first time in its pristine history, Rosewood Hills admitted there had been cracks beneath the marble. Some called it progress. The twins just called it overdue. A mural went up in the courtyard by spring. Student art, vibrant colors, interlinked arms of every shade. In the center, two silhouettes, strong, upright, painted in bold strokes of black and gold. Jada didn't say anything the first time she saw it, but she stood still for a long time. Janelle whispered, "Looks like us." Jada smiled, just a little. "Maybe it is." At home, their father framed the news article and placed it on the living room wall. Twins lead change after school fails to protect them. Underneath it, in smaller print, "We didn't want to be an example," said Janelle Rivers. "But if we are, let it mean something." That night, Derek sat across from them at the dinner table, his expression unreadable as always. But when he finally spoke, his voice was warm with pride. "You stood your ground," he said. "You didn't fold." "No," Jada said, her voice quiet, steady. "We never will." And they wouldn't, because legacy wasn't just what you left behind. It was what you carried with you, what you walked with. And they walked with strength now, not just their own, but the strength of everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet, to shrink, to survive without speaking. They didn't just survive, they were seen. And that was the beginning of everything. This story isn't just about two girls. It's about all of us. It's a reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks quietly through a storm, refusing to be broken. Jada and Janelle didn't seek attention, and they didn't ask to be heroes. But when the line was crossed, they stood. Not in rage, but in control. Not to fight for revenge, but to fight for respect. These are the justice stories we must not only tell, but carry forward. Because for so long, too many voices, especially those of Black people, have been dismissed, distorted, or silenced. But not anymore. Not when we choose to listen, not when we choose to see. Their journey is one of many incredible stories, stories of discipline, dignity, and unbreakable will. It is one of those rare narrated stories that don't just entertain, they awaken something deeper in us, something true. And so now we ask you, if this story moved you, share it. If it made you reflect, talk about it. If you saw yourself or someone you love in it, pass it on. Because change doesn't start in the headlines. It starts in moments like this, where unraveled fates come together not in tragedy, but in transformation. Let's make sure these stories don't fade. Stories like that of Jada and Janelle Rivers don't just stay with you, they speak to you. As older adults, many of us have lived through decades of change, civil rights marches, court rulings, policy reforms. But even today, we're reminded that the fight for justice, especially for young Black Americans, is far from over. The story of these two teenage girls in a polished, privileged school environment reminds us that racism doesn't always scream. Often, it whispers, isolates, and tries to erase without being seen. And yet, their quiet strength offers us enduring lessons worth reflecting on. First, self-control is not weakness. For generations, we've taught our children to turn the other cheek, not because they lack strength, but because restraint can be a deeper power. Jada and Janelle didn't react in anger when mocked or humiliated. They remembered what their father taught them. Control is power. In an age where outrage can go viral in seconds, their discipline was revolutionary. And when the time came to defend themselves, they did so with grace, precision, and purpose, not violence. Second, the story is a clear lesson in how systems often fail those they are meant to protect. Teachers who looked away, administrators who hesitated, adults who avoided difficult truths. For many older viewers, this may feel all too familiar. But the difference today lies in visibility. The fight caught on video didn't just defend the girls, it revealed the cracks in the institution. The silence was broken. That's a powerful reminder for all of us. When we remain silent in the face of injustice, we become complicit. And when we speak up, we open the door to change. Third, this is a story about family values. Jada and Janelle's father, Derek, is not loud or vengeful. He is present, principled, and unshakable. His role as a father reminds us that behind every brave child is someone who taught them how to stand tall. In a world that often glorifies big personalities and dramatic gestures, his quiet dignity shows us that leadership starts at home, in dinner table talks, in quiet lessons about pride, in the moments no one sees. Finally, this is a story about legacy and what we leave behind. The mural in the courtyard, the school's changed policies, the students who spoke up afterward. The girls didn't just survive, they made it safer for others to follow. As older adults, we often reflect on what impact we've had. Stories like this challenge us to think not only about the world we've shaped, but how we can still shape it by mentoring, by voting, by telling these stories, and by ensuring our grandchildren grow up in a world where justice isn't just a word, but a lived reality. Jida and Janelle remind us, justice doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it walks through a storm with its head held high and doesn't fold. That is a lesson worth passing on.